From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here.
ChatGPT, AI machines,
satellite, engine ignition,
Click Here.
and the liftoff.
What does it actually mean to own something? Not in theory, not on paper, but in a world where the things we own are increasingly controlled by someone else. When you buy a piece of technology, like a laptop or a phone, it feels simple. It's physically yours, you put it in your home, you can take it everywhere you go. But the moment you turn it on, it all gets murkier. Is the software on it owned by you? What about your data stored in the cloud? And maybe the bigger question, what can you actually do with the things you think you own?
As soon as these devices connect to a network, to the internet, as soon as they depend on software for their functionality, there's a real sense in which consumers are at the mercy of the companies that are selling them these devices.
From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here, a show about the people making and breaking our digital world. I'm Dina Temple-Raston. Today, ownership isn't disappearing all at once. It's being rewritten line by line, in code and contracts and the quiet updates you never see. Today, we talk about this with Aaron Perzanowski. He and co-author Jason Schultz wrote a book called The End of Ownership, and they've been tracking this shift for years. How we went from owning things to merely accessing them. We asked him to help us make sense of where this is all heading and what's really at stake when ownership disappears. Because if you don't control what you paid for, what exactly did you buy? We'll be right back. Welcome back. For a long time, ownership felt simple. If you bought something, it was yours. You could lend it, you could resell it, you could take it apart, you could fix it. No permissions, no updates, no fine print. For more than a century, that idea held. Ownership meant control. But what happens when the thing you bought can be changed after you buy it? That's where Aaron Perzanowski says the old rules start to break. And to understand how we got here, he takes us back more than a century to a fight over something surprisingly small, a book.
Property law, especially when it comes to personal property, is quite rigid, right? Like the property law does not allow the sale of an item to be subject to post-sale restrictions imposed by the seller, right? You can't sell me a pair of shoes with a bunch of legal strings attached that say, you're only allowed to wear these shoes on the weekend and you can't get them wet. So I'll give you a great example. This is a book called The Castaway. It was published in 1908. And this was the subject of the first U.S. Supreme Court for sale decision. This is a first edition of the book, which I got on eBay. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, the price of this book at retail is $1 net. No dealer is licensed to sell it at a less price. And sale at a less price will be treated as an infringement of the copyright. Macy's tried to sell the book for less than that price, and they took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, that's not a thing you get to do. You can write that in the front of your book, but no one has to pay attention to it, right? And 100 years later, we live in a world where basically every product you buy comes with something akin to that restriction, right? There's a license that you agree to when you bought a new laptop. There are license terms that govern the software in every new vehicle on the road. And that gives manufacturers this incredible degree of power to restrict resale of the products that we buy, to restrict the way we use the products that we buy, and to restrict the repair of the products that we buy. So fundamentally, I think that's the core of the problem.
One example of this happened in 2009, when Amazon overnight deleted copies of 1984 and other novels from people's Kindles without notice.
The founder and CEO of Amazon.com, Jeff Bezos, says he's sorry. Bezos wrote this: "This is an apology for the way we previously handled illegally sold copies of 1984 and other novels on Kindle. Our solution to the problem was stupid, thoughtless, and painfully out of line with our principles."
The publisher or the bookseller could never come into your house and take that book away because they decided they don't want you to have it anymore. But that's power that technology companies like Amazon do in fact have. So you go to bed thinking you own a copy of 1984 and you wake up the next morning to find that it has been memory holed. And I think that's a really disturbing moment for a lot of consumers, in part because it takes something away from them that they have paid for, but also because it reveals how little control they really have over this technology.
I think the other thing that people have sort of twigged onto is the way software is treated differently from other things we buy. Why is it that software and digital products seem to be sort of special in the eyes of the law?
The software industry attempted to kind of reposition these transactions, not as sales where I buy a product from a company for a one-time price, but as licenses. As anyone who's ever tried to read a license agreement can tell you, there are lots of rules and restrictions and limitations. And the licensing mechanism was seen by the software industry as a way to give them control over their products that they wouldn't otherwise have.
My thought was when, say, I had Microsoft Windows or whatever it was the reason I got the license or the reason why they still had control was because they were still going to send me updates to make sure that there was nothing wrong with the software. Was that sort of a bait and switch? Or was I totally naive?
No. I don't think that's totally naive. I do think this is an important differentiation. Software updates are necessary for, security updates in particular. But the license is not necessary in order for those updates to be offered, right? Those things are intertwined, but I think they could be decoupled in a way that would give consumers access to ongoing support, ongoing updates, without requiring them to sort of sacrifice their ownership interest in the version of the product that they initially purchased.
When you talk about the Internet of Things, you talk about it as the Internet of Things you don't own. What do you mean by that?
Most of us have a sense that when we buy a product, we bring it home, we put it in our living rooms, wherever it might be, that we control these devices. As soon as these devices connect to a network, to the internet, as soon as they depend on software for their functionality, there's a real sense in which consumers are at the mercy of the companies that are selling them these devices. We see this really clearly when companies decide they no longer want to support a particular device. And they say, we're no longer going to push out software updates. And in fact, we're going to push out one final update that turns this device you bought into a useless brick.
So what does it mean when the things we own are changed without our permission? And if ownership is indeed starting to slip, who's trying to take it back? That's next, after the break. You're listening to Click Here. I'm Dina Temple-Raston. Welcome back. When we buy a product, we like to think we own it because we can hold it in our hands and use it. But today, a large part of how we access media is much less tangible. We use streaming platforms or connect to the cloud. Our movies, our books, our music, increasingly, they're not things we keep. They're things we log into. Aaron Perzanowski says we should be concerned about that.
So I worry a lot about what it means when we consolidate and centralize control over culture in the hands of a small number of firms. We've seen this play out over the decades. We're seeing it play out right now in cable channel and streaming and movie studio acquisitions that are in the news. And I think there are real reasons to worry about this. One reason to worry is cultural preservation. So we talked earlier about Amazon removing copies of 1984 from people's Kindles, and that's a real problem. Amazon could just as easily, with the cooperation of a publisher, rewrite 1984, right? They can make changes to the text and push that text out to consumers who think they bought this book. When you publish a new edition of a book, the old hardcover copies are still there. They're still floating around, right? When you make changes to digital materials, there's a real possibility that they simply displace what was already there. And so that opens the door to sort of revisionist history of our culture. Again, not inconsistent with what we see in 1984 itself.
So, I mean, the point you're making is that this is far beyond just inconvenience, that what really happens to markets and innovation and culture, if things are truly not owned by the people who buy them, is that they can change.
I think it's a real worry. It's one we have to take seriously. We have seen real documented examples where publishers are willing to rewrite the facts of history, to rewrite the facts of biology or evolution to meet these sort of ideological litmus tests. When we move that tendency into the digital space, I'm very concerned about what that means for the historical record.
So at Click Here, we talk a lot about how technology and change doesn't just have to wash over you, that you as an individual have agency. Are there ways people are pushing back against this? I mean, do you see movements, either legal ones or cultural ones, that are trying to restore some of those ownership rights?
I do. I think there's a really big unmet need for genuine ownership, and we see that reflected in a few ways. One thing we're seeing is a return to tangible media. Obviously, the music industry is still dominated by streaming services, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. But if you look at vinyl record sales over the last 10 years, they tell a story of a committed group of consumers, a growing group of consumers who are willing to spend lots more money to acquire music that they genuinely own. We're seeing something similar happen in the film industry as well, right? As more people are starting to actually think, hey, maybe I should buy this movie on a disc so that I get to have it and play it whenever I want, instead of hoping that next month it's still on one of the 9 streaming services that I'm paying for. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, is a market response. I think the clearest example of a legal response to these problems is this right to repair movement that has been very effective in the United States over the past 5 or 6 years at getting state level laws passed that protect crucial ownership interests of consumers. So more than 100 million Americans now live in states that have passed right to repair legislation. So that, I think, is also a reflection of this deep desire for greater control over the products that we buy, the products that we use.
So you've been digging into this for a while. What would a healthier version of ownership look like in the future? And how do you think we build a digital world where people still feel like the things they buy are actually theirs?
This is such an important question. It matters for creators that people see the work that they bring into the world as something that is valuable, as something that is unique. When we treat music or movies not even like commodities, but like utilities, right? I pay my monthly music bill and then I just listen to whatever the algorithm happens to feed me. That is not a recipe for music fandom. So I think artists have to take consumer ownership seriously too, because it has a direct impact on the viability of their careers long term. If you can get some agreement between the creative community and consumers, I think we can build a kind of ownership that largely replicates what we saw in the analog era. right? What consumers want is pretty straightforward. They want the right to buy things that are theirs permanently. They want to be able to buy things that are not going to disappear, that are not going to be altered, that are not going to be replaced with a new version that they didn't sign up for. And I think ultimately what matters to consumers is the sense that they're getting a fair deal, right?
Aaron Perzanowski, thanks so much for being with us. I learned a lot.
It was great talking with you.
Technology has been quietly reshaping ownership for years, often without us even noticing. And that leaves us with a choice. Do we accept the shift or push back on it? Maybe it starts small, like buying physical copies of books and movies and music. It doesn't feel like much, but it restores something that's been slipping away. Control. This is Click Here. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gaida, Zach Hirsch, and Casey Georgie. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Sarah Quevedo, and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, our illustrator is Megan Goff, and our sound designers and engineers are Jake Cook and Jesse Neiswanger. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and thanks for listening.